However you want to hold it, as long as we just see the thing clap in a second.
Task cam recording.
Ready?
Is the
task cam on?
Alright, test cam's on.
Ready? Okay.
Cameras are rolling.
Okay. And action. Awesome. Alright.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Alright, so real quick before we get to the fun questions, do you mind stating your name and then spelling it for us?
My name is Keith Harrison, and it's spelled KeithHarrison.
Well, you got to the first question. We could just say we're done there, but...
We're done there.
Yeah, we're good. Okay, so you were born and raised in Dayton, but if we were to go back a little bit further from that, maybe in the 40s and 50s, we see that there's this great migration to Dayton from people all over the country. Could you tell us a little bit about where your previous generation stemmed from, like your parents or grandparents?
Well, my grandparents and parents are, my mother's from Indianapolis, and my dad's side of the family is from Georgia. And they migrated up here, of course, on my dad's side. And my mother came over from Indianapolis because she went to the Art Institute for art and became a substitute art teacher.
Wonderful, wonderful. Sorry, I said the little in there. I didn't mean to get that. I'm used to like adding like So, when we had our pre-interview, you told me a wonderful story about your mom and her playing the piano. Could you retell us that story real quick?
Yes. Coming up, at the age of 10, I was beating on pots and pans and then wanted to play the piano or organ. My parents bought me an organ that sits on your lap and with the little push buttons on the side. And as I got older, I started playing in a high school band, putting high school bands together. And when I became 18, I asked my mother, I said, "Mom, is there anybody in the family who plays piano?" And my mother said, "Come here, boy." So she took me over to the piano we had in what we called our playroom. And there was always a hymn book that sat on top of the piano. She pulled that hymn book down, she opened it up, and she started reading and playing the music in the hymn book. And I said, wow. I started crying. I don't know if it was tears of joy or tears of anger. And I said, "Mom, why?" And she said, "Your dad told me to never let you know that I played music because he didn't want you to play music." And so that just took me by surprise so much that it drove me to say, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play music. So my father probably is the reason I stayed in music because of that.
That's crazy. Is there any specific reason why your dad thought that?
My dad was a laborer, and he felt that, that's the way we should become labor workers opposed to music. He always felt that music drew the attention of drugs, alcohol, and just bad, atmosphere. I guess from him coming up and going to clubs or what have you. But I told him, I said, that's on the individual, if they want to go that route.
Absolutely. Well, that's I really loved that story when you told us that first. And I was like, I need to get that on camera. Was there any other early musical influences from your childhood, maybe performers or vinyls you heard or other members in your family?
Oh, yeah. My father used to play James Brown music throughout the house. And there was one, I'll share this. The one song used to come on, "Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud." So I would march around the house saying it all the time. He said, "If you don't stop singing that, I'm going to show you who's black and proud." So, James Brown, Sly and the Family Stone, the Everly Brothers. "Wake up, little Susie, wake up." That was one of my favorite records that my dad played all the time. So it was those three artists.
Wow.
Yeah.
And those are also really big components of when you
Yes.
think of funk and
Yes.
stuff.
Exactly.
So the schools, you talked a little bit about like your school and how you got in bands with your friends at
Mhm.
school. So the schools in Dayton at your time had a lot of money poured into the arts program.
Yes, they did.
So this gave so many people the ability to learn and create new styles of music, ultimately providing creation of funk. So how did your music education help you grow as a musician?
Wow. Just constantly listening to records. Singing in high school choir is where I got my first lesson in harmonies. You know, because you had the sopranos, the altos, the tenors, and the baritones. And I just loved how that sound. And being a piano player, all those colors are there too on the piano. So humming in on singing in the choir, listening to records helped me with my development.
That's wonderful. That's great. So now we're going to move just a little bit past that as now you graduated high school and you actually got involved with the Air Force as still doing music. So this was in the 70s, correct?
71.
71, okay. So during that time, that could have been seen as a full career. You could have stayed in the Air Force and continued to do that. Could you tell me a little bit about the experience and then why music still persisted in your life during that time?
Okay. The reason I went into the Air Force, because my father, when I graduated, I turned down a football scholarship to do music. So my father said, "You're not going to lay around here and play music. You're going to get a job. You're going to get a real job." And I said, "Well, music can be a real job." He said, "Not in this house." And so I said, "I can't stay here no longer." So the quickest way out for me was I'll just join the military and maybe find my way through the military, some musical things that I could get involved with, like the Air Force Blues. Well, they didn't let me in there because they said you had to have a music degree to be in the Air Force Blue. So once I went into the Air Force, I put in for Spain, England, California, and they shipped me right back to Wright Pat. So what that did, it enabled me to hook back up with the band I was with in high school, which we would call Phase 3, and the rest is history. We made a record. So when it came to my last year in the military, they gave me 3 months early out because I finally got orders to be shipped away. I did go TDY to Guam during the Cambodian bombing for 6 months and came back. But then I finally got orders to be shipped somewhere with only 3 months left, and Uncle Sam said, "Are you going to resign?" I said, "No." So they said, "Well, rather than to ship you and spend all that money to ship you and ship you back, we're going to give you a 3 month early honorable discharge." I said, "I'll take it." And that's how the music kept going.
Wow. Do you mind just saying a little bit, if you don't mind, about that trip to Guam for those 6 months?
Oh wow, that was really traumatizing for me because you're on an island that's 30 miles long, 15 miles wide, and it sits in the middle of the ocean. It's 12 miles from the equator. So at noon, it's like 110, 112. The sun is directly over your head and your shadow goes away. And the whole island is nothing but coral reef. And there were still bombs, there's caves you couldn't go in from World War II that could go off. Every now and then you would hear an explosion in one of the caves. There was 175 B-52 bombers on the island. 4 of them were loaded with nukes. So during the Cambodian bombing, every 10 hours, 10 B-52s would take off and 10 would come in around the clock every 10 hours. So we were working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day on the flight line. And I experienced, not just myself, but other members of the service. A guy hung himself in our barracks. And to see that, it's like, wow, is this what's going to happen to me? Because, when you get there, they say, you're never going home, you're never going home. And that kind of played with you mentally, am I ever going to see home again, even though you were behind the lines, but you were still, at any time, the island could have been attacked or what have you. So it was quite a traumatizing experience for me.
Do you think that the atmosphere of the times in the early 70s with the Vietnam War, did it create that sense of more dread of where maybe their country was at, and there was a lot of war going on?
Yeah, we always felt, what are we fighting for? We were fighting somebody else's war, and that seems to be what we're still doing in today. We're always supporting other people, but we have a lot of things that's going on in our own country that needs to be attended to, that I don't think gets the attention like we do with other countries.
Okay, absolutely. So, with the 60s and 70s in picture, as we were just talking about, there's a lot of huge movements going on in your life. There's a lot of big events that happened recently. The assassinations of MLK and Robert Kennedy, the Civil Rights Movement, Vietnam War, which you were personally involved with, and then locally, Dayton was having its race riots in the late 60s.
Yes, they were.
What was your personal experience from maybe some of these events? You talked about the Vietnam War, but maybe some of these other events.
Well, there was the curfew. When we had that going on in Dayton, you had to be off the streets by 10 o'clock. And the police would patrol the streets. I lived in Jefferson Township, so we lived on a 7-acre farm. We had the pigs and the chickens and pet pony, and so we would play a game. We would run the streets and see who would not get caught. So we're running in between houses as the police is patrolling the streets. Just some kids do, teenagers do it, at that time. Right around the corner, I remember they had a headquarters for H. Rap Brown. And there was a man there, his name was General Chewy, that stayed there. But after understanding the movement and what it was for, he had a more calmness come over you about the situation and what they stood for.
Okay. Yeah, I think there was just so much going on at that time.
Yeah, it was. And music kept you, pretty much at ease, just being able to do music and create music. It's funny, you would think, because you may have wrote more songs that would pertain to stuff like that, but a lot of the thoughts of my songwriting was love songs and funk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you could still express your feelings through that type of music, which I think we're just about to get to. So with the community of Dayton in the 70s, with the political and racial unrest during, there was a lot of big events in Dayton, like we just talked about, the race riots. The white flight happened in the 70s, and then the building of I-75 led to companies leaving here, and that really impacted the population and the economy of Dayton during that time. So as the city was going through these drastic changes, what was the community like? I know you were you were kind of in the military and then you came back, but you were still in Wright Pat. Did you feel the community shifting as those big events happened?
Yeah, sort of, kind of. Again, with the kind of upbringing I had, it kept me out of the streets, away from the places that a lot of that stuff was going on, because our family was very family oriented. Even with cousins, everybody would come to the farm on the weekend, and we have cookouts. We were eating. My father was cooking steak before we knew that steak was going to be a high priced meat, because you have cow butchered, pigs butchered. So we had plenty to eat. We harvested our own food, but you could see there was a bit of a shift And the shift was more toward people starting to live in poverty. You know, from the like down on Salem, off Salem, some of those streets off Salem, those used to be mansions, and those people moved out, getting away from where all the violence and stuff was happening, and the value of those homes that went down. So people started, to live more in poverty than keeping things on an even and what have you. That kind of made a shift, I think, in how people started to live.
Do you feel like these events impacted your musical creation? How
Well,
you approached
yes, it did, because it opened up a lot of clubs. So clubs wanted house bands. So you were able to go in these clubs and work, and that was people's relief coming out of the neighborhoods and getting off work. They could go to these clubs that were all over, and everywhere there was a house band somewhere playing, So that made people feel good and relief, gave them relief from whatever stress they had on themselves. And of course, you can see I'm writing a book, and it's going to be called Riding High: My Journey with Faze-O, Heatwave, and the Dazz Band. A lot of stuff that we're talking about is in that book.
How soon do we maybe see a release for that?
Well, I finished Faze-O, and I'm just finishing up Heatwave, and I'm getting ready to start on the Dazz Band. I got 6 albums worth of Dazz Band stuff to write about, because I'm writing about each movement of the records, and that jogs my memory about what was I doing, or what were we doing during the making of this album and that album. So Heatwave was kind of, because it was only 2 albums I did with them, but there was a lot of stuff going on between the Wilder brothers. But I tried to keep it about my journey versus what was happening in group. But what happened in groups changed how I reacted too. So I would say you could probably say in 2025, maybe sooner, that book will be finished, and I'll be working on my second book, which will be entitled Musicians for Hire. And I would talk about when I played with the Ohio Players as a hired musician, when I played with Morris Day and the Time Band as a hired musician, when I played with a group called Low Key as a hired musician.
Wow, those seem like so many fun projects. And we were talking about earlier about the podcast and everything.
Yeah.
I hope when 2025 or earlier, if it comes out, I'll email you again and be like, hey, I gotta get my thing signed.
Definitely so. Yes.
So now as we move into the next act here, we're gonna talk more kind of about your musicianship, your time with some of your bands and your albums, and then your success with that.
Okay.
So could you give us you talked a little bit about how Phase 3, you came out of the military, and then it shifted into Faze-O. How did what was the early beginnings? Like, how did you make that first album? You toured, you gained popularity, and then you made an album. So could you go through a little bit of that start?
Well, as Phase 3, we were really, really one of the, if not the top group in Dayton, playing around in the clubs, and we had a 3-piece horn section. They were all Caucasian. And the rest of the band, we had trumpet, sax, and trombone. And the rest of the group were minority. And so we had played down in the ATL, which is called Atlanta, Georgia. And there was a guy there, Al Heyman, who's really popular now. He was in the music promotion business. And he had a company called Taurus Productions. He saw us, and he wanted to take us under his wing. So when we came back to Dayton, we had one more gig to do, and it was at Wampler's Arena, which they used to have the Postman's Ball. And Clarence Satchel of the Ohio Players was there. and that's when the Ohio players were really big. And he had on a one-piece leather jumpsuit. So we're playing, we see this guy approaching the stage as we get ready to take our break. And he said, "Hey, I really like you guys." And guys was with him. "That's Clarence Satchel with Ohio players." Some of the guys, the horn players, "Who is he?" So he said, "I have $24,000 and I want to take you guys in the studio." And he said, "If you're interested, be at my house tomorrow. I'm going to give you my address." So he said, "Who's the leader of the band?" And the bass player was the leader of the band, then Tyrone Crumb. So when he left, we had the U-Haul trailer all packed up. We were ready. Our wives, the girlfriends were ready. We were going to go down first, get set up, and then send for them. So the horn section said, "Man, I don't feel good about this." We said, "Well, it won't hurt to go check it out." So we pull up to his house in the driveway, and we're sitting there a whole hour. We'd already went to the door. We're sitting there an hour, and guys was like, "Come on, man, let's go." So we get ready to go, and he comes out the door, and he's laughing. And we said, "What's so funny? Why'd you make us wait so long?" He said, "I wanted to see how bad you wanted it." So we all went into the house, and we're looking, and we're like, "Oh, wow." We saw all this gold and platinum records. There was a see-through fish bowl table with fish swimming around under it. White plush leather couch that had one of the big screen Sony TVs, that just came out. And so he said, "Let me see." He said, "Who's the leader?" He said, "You the leader." And he pointed to the bass player. Some of the guys were like, "Wow, how do you know that?" And he said, "Man, we told him last night." So he went in, took him in his office. When he came back out, it was like, "Guys, everything's going to be all right." So he says, "Now, if you're interested," he says, "I'll call you in a couple of weeks, and we're going to go in the studio and start recording." So the horn players wasn't with it. They was like, "Man, something just don't feel right." So we took a vote. We said, "Well, let's take a vote." We all voted to stay, and the horn players left. And so we went to the studio, and the rest is history. And how it became Faze-O, we were singing a song. You said you would listen to, there's a song called Test. And I said, "Test." Well, after we had drunk some Little Kings, we was kind of all around the mic. "Test, test 1, 2. And the lead singer said, "This is Faze-O." And we looked at him and was like, "Oh man, I like that. Faze-O." And we said, the O can represent Ohio. And that's how we got the name Faze-O.
Wow, I never knew that was the story behind that. I love that so much more because, yes, I listened to that song and I was like, I wondered if that was one of their earlier kind of tracks on that album, even though it's the last one.
Though a lot of the songs on the Riding High album were songs we were already playing in the clubs. They were our original songs. Yeah.
Wow. I'm gonna re-listen to it and just with that context in mind.
If you listen real close, you could tell we were kind of blitzed from the drinking.
Well, that was the time.
Sometimes some of your best music comes out, when you got a little buzz going.
Yeah.
Some people got to have it to even record. Look, Janis Joplin was one of them. A lot of your earlier artists, Jimi Hendrix, they were all just getting toasted before they went in because of the type of music they were feeling and playing, so.
Well, so you said that's the rest is history. Now Faze-O is now officially Faze-O.
Now officially Faze-O.
So you were touring. You started touring, I'm guessing, after 1977, after the release of your first album.
Yes.
when funk was pretty much at its peak. And
Yes.
your single "Riding High" reached number 9 on the U.S. R&B
Yes,
chart.
yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the touring and the feeling of being on the road now as a number, you
Well,
could say, number 9 single?
The touring was great. The feeling first of the song, people always ask this, so I have to tell it. How did you come up with the name Riding High? Duh. What's the name of the song? I was high.
Band.
So the touring, we toured with the Ohio Players. We were the opening act, and a lot of the players were playing at a lot of colleges back then. So we hit the college circuit, and that helped grow our audience too, because it was the first time of them seeing us. They already knew about the whole Ohio Players, but Riding High hadn't reached all the markets yet. But we got our little 15 minutes of fame. We played Riding High and 2 other cover songs, and that touring was fun.
And as you said, you opened for the Ohio Players, and
Yeah.
not only were they a big funk band in Dayton, during that time you were Heatwave, Slave,
Mm-hmm.
tons of other bands.
Right.
How was that music scene just in Dayton? Did you feel that energy was different in Dayton with all those bands?
Oh
there?
yeah, everybody had their own identity and style, and you always hear some people say it was something in the water, but it really wasn't. I just think it was the type of music that we were listening to at the time. Of course, the Ohio Players are the ones who set it off for everybody, and they had sort of, they had a funky sound to their songs, but then everybody started developing, like Faze-O, our funk was like syncopation. It was like a syncopation type of funk, Slave had that one drive funk, you had Heatwave was more of a smooth kind of funk, but their funk really got developed overseas in Europe, because the Wilder Brothers were the only 2 that was from Dayton at the time, and then their cousin Billy Jones joined in on guitar, but their funk kind of derived from Rod Temperton, and you notice that in Michael Jackson's Off the Wall, because Rod Temperton wrote that whole album's worth primarily. So Rod had, he was from Worms, Germany, so he had a funk about himself. But as far as the Dayton groups, we all had our kind of own. Dayton had their own thing with you caught my eye, I can't deny. Cutie pie. They had their own kind of vibe. And a lot of the groups, we all played in bands in high school because you had a lot of talent shows that schools presented, and you played in those talent shows and kind of developed a sound. Some of the people came up from the South and came in with a blues. This is when I was younger. It was more bluesy then in the Dayton area. And then sort of that blues got combined with funk, and it's like Minneapolis has their own style with Prince and the Time Band, but Dayton has the majority of people who came out of one city that had a funk about themselves.
Wow.
It's hard to explain because funk is a feeling. And whatever the feel is at that time, whether it's the atmosphere you're in or a place that you're in, you feel it. Lakeside had a funk about themselves, coming up. So it was really cool to have that many groups. I think it was like 36 groups in Dayton at the time when all this music was, but only so many of us made it out. But it was 36 bands.
all in that one city.
all in this one city
And I think you
from
really,
different neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I think you really put it well with how you said it's more of a feeling. Funk
It's
is more of a feeling.
funk is a feeling.
Are we good on this camera? I know you were taking a look at it. I
Yeah.
noticed you were like shuffling back
You
here.
should be good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So we have your Faze-O work.
Mm-hmm.
Now you move to Heatwave.
Right.
You did a little bit of album work with them. Could you tell us what you did with them, and could you tell us how the working with that guys, how you said, you know, funk bands have a different feel, working with that group of guys still had the Dayton feel inside them, even though it was a different band.
Right. Working with Rod Temperton was one of my greatest moments in music history, period. I mean, this man taught me a lot about chords, harmonizing, cluster chords. He said zebra chords. In the Heatwave sound, you had this vocal harmony, and then there was one harmony that was subliminal, but it was an off harmony that made their sounds, which drew the human ear in, you know. And just the way they recorded, we would dub 4-part harmonies 8 times. So if you got your stereo speakers, you got vocals like this. Now, most groups do 2 times, so you got 4 and 4, which, you know, but we did 8 times to give it that thick, pure, beautiful sound. And I still use that technique today. When people hear songs, man, how do you get your backgrounds to sound like that? I said, that's my secret, but I just gave it away.
We don't have to use that part. We can cut that part out if you want.
No, but it's still it's a trick to doing it.
Okay.
You know, I don't mind sharing that. But Rod, I said, where do you get your ideas from? And he said, movies. And at the time, that's when Betamaxes were out. And he said, you go to my house, you see nothing but Betamax movies all over the floor. So that's where he got his ideas from. For every one song, Rod had 2 to 3 sets of lyrics with different melodies. If you didn't like it one way, he said, okay, listen to it this way. And I thought that was work. You're talking about a work ethic. And that taught me, Keith, if you want it, you got to work at it. Look what this guy's doing. You got to put more work in, you know. So that part of Heatwave was the part I loved the most, was in the studio. Of course, on stage they were phenomenal with the steps and the moves and all of that. But they had already had the big hit Boogie Nights, Groove Line, Always and Forever. The one song that stuck out the most for me was Big Guns, one that I recorded with them on, I think it was Heatwave Current, or was it? Yeah, Heatwave Current, Posing the Closing, you know. So they had some real nice funk grooves, but Johnny also turned down a lot of good songs like Rock With You. And Rod would always give Heatwave first choice at the song before he gave them to anybody else. And we would actually record some of them, you know, demo them. But you could tell, you know, Rock With You wouldn't have been a song for Johnny's type of voice, this smooth voice. But for us as the musicians and singers, we were like, man, this is going to be a hit. And it was. So, you know, Give Me the Nights, I'll Stomp, all those songs, you know. So Rod was the one, you know, they had an international band, you know. You had Mario, who's from Spain, on bass. You had Bilbo Berger, who's from Czechoslovakia, on drums. He was the shuffle king. And you had Roy Carter, who's from England, on guitar, and then you had a guy named Eric, who's from Australia, I think, that played guitar before he left. And then a lot of more of the American guys came in, like myself, Billy Jones, J.D. Nicholas, who's from England, and he went on to become the lead singer for the Commodores.
So I mean, and there's just so much diversity in there, and then,
Yeah, it was a lot of diversity,
yeah,
which pulled all that together.
which is fascinating. too.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's just a section, like you said. You only did 2 albums with Heatwave, and then you moved on to your next kind of more bigger project, which was
Right.
with the Dazz Band.
Dazz Band.
And when you worked with the Dazz Band, you ended up winning a Grammy in 1982. You're known as one of the only Dayton funk artists to have a Grammy. How do you feel about that and being able to express the voice of Dayton to millions of people? Because you are
Wow.
central to them.
Well, the best way to express that is I'm proud to be a part of the Dazz Band, but I wasn't a part of the recording of Let It Whip. They had just finished Let It Whip when I came in. So, but Let It Whip, the Grammy is for how you perform that record, that song on record. Best performance by a duo or single group. And that's what that stood for. But here's something that a lot of people don't know. And it's the only time in history that this has ever happened. It was actually a tie with Earth, Wind, and Fire. Earth, Wind, and Fire had been winning that category for years. I'm appreciative that the band included me to receive the award. And the producers actually wrote the song. And they're deceased now. Reggie Andrews and Mdugu Chandler, who played with, what was the name of that jazz group? Well, he played with George Dukes. And then he went on to play with, it was a jazz group. I can't remember offhand right now. But both of them, Reggie just passed away earlier this year. And Mdugu passed away a couple of years ago. But they're the ones who wrote Let It Whip. So kudos to the producers to come up with a song like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many involving hands in the process of making it.
Yeah.
Even though you weren't necessarily part of the full process of winning that Grammy,
Right.
how did your family feel? Bring home a Grammy.
Oh, my family was, wow. They was like, wow. That's one of the highest achievements you can get in the music industry. There's one other person that won a Grammy from here. It was for Best Song of the Year. He doesn't live here anymore, but he was from Dayton. I can't remember his name. So there's actually 2 people who have Grammys in Dayton. And his was for Best Song of the Year. It was with a pop group. It wasn't funk, but it was with a pop group.
Well, at least you're the one that's still here, though.
Yeah,
You're the one, hey, you're still around.
Yeah.
These ones might go a little bit faster. There's more shorter stories here. One longer question, but you said you took a break from touring in the 90s.
Yes.
Could you just go into why?
I came off the road in the 90s because my wife had gotten sick from Lyme's disease. So I had to look at my wedding vows, through sickness and health. And I came off the road to take care of her. And we had 2 daughters then, too. So during that time, it was hard for me. I saved up enough money to kind of live. Probably could have lived off that money longer than the 5 years, but I was spending a lot of it. But I drew myself back. I was making like $3,500 a week playing in the band. So I cut that in half, paid myself $1,500 every 2 weeks. But I hooked up with another guy named Sanford Whitlow, which we called Sam the Man, who we became writing partners. So every morning we say, all right, who's going to buy breakfast? Who's going to buy lunch? Who's going to buy dinner? And next thing I know, my wife is saying, honey, the rent is due. And I said, write a check. She said, there's no more money. I said, what do you mean there's no more money? She said, there's no more money. So I had to like get a job. So I couldn't go back out on the road, you know. So I landed a job with Girl Scouts. They had a grant to take inner city youth camping. Well, I'm a country boy. I applied for the job and I got it. And it was inner city kids, and it kind of brought me back to reality to see how children, these were low income children living in poverty, to see how people were living. And you know, I'm like, wow, Keith, you out there touring all over the world, and look how these people are living. So it drew an interest in me to work with children then. And so I worked with Campfire, took 350 inner city youth camping, and the way I drew them in was through my music, you know. And so one thing led to another, and the housing authority, which then was called Dayton Metropolitan Housing, the director said we need to get him. So when the grant ran out, they hired me to oversee 12 DMHA housing sites to work with kids K through 12. And my supervisor said that the government had a grant out then called the DEP program. It was money to help deterring kids from drugs and things of that nature. So my boss had told me, create some programs, you know, whatever you can come up with, just get the kids involved. So I got kids involved in soapbox racing, which is, you know, has always not been an attraction for minority kids. But we got them into soapbox racing. I got the maintenance guys to be the crew because you have to put the car together and it has to pass inspections. So the girls were the ones that were better at it than the guys because the way they could position their bodies in the cars, they were more flexible than guys, and you had to really get down low because of the air velocity. So we had 12 cars, one representing each site, and out of 72 cars, we came in second and fourth. And we got a spot on Good Morning America. So that was kind of cool. And I only told the kids you have to have a C average to be able to drive one of the cars. So it not only did it help them with their grades, then we went on, myself and Pastor Leon Wilkinson, we formed a choir, a Dayton Metropolitan Housing Choir. And we won 2 national awards for it. We were invited to the President's Park when President Clinton was in office to sing. We went to Washington, D.C., and that went on to be very successful too. After that, I got hired to be an executive director for Campfire Girls. And they had never had a man for a director. Here I am, you know, it's an all-women organization. And, you know, they had a big following, a big support system with Campfire. We were in 5 counties. So we oversaw 4,000 children. There was a lot of things that opened my eyes with that organization. Of course, you know, it's a non-profit, so you have to raise money. So Campfire had curriculum program, after school programs. They had pre and post testing, which I pushed those. And I got 2 contracts from the county. Each one was for $450,000. And then I got foundation grants from DPNL, Veteran. And I invited those people to the site to see what the kids were doing. Well, they took away after school program funding. And if you notice, there's no after school programs around hardly no more. they closed down a lot of the rec centers where you would hold after school programming, so our money was running dry. Headquarters decided to change the name from Campfire Girls to Campfire Boys and Girls. And that hurt a lot of women who stopped giving or supporting, you know. So the board decided to dissolve the organization. And once that got dissolved, I got hired by the county to work with the reentry program, which is, returning citizens, and I was able to retire.
Off all that.
After all the, because I was working government, so I did 30 years,
Wow.
With all three of those combined.
It's almost like you lived a second life there.
It was, but I was still doing music on the side. I was doing jingles. Me and my partner did a Sprite jingle that ran for 2 years. Coca-Cola did world travel. When they had the Dayton air shows, and they used to televise it on Channel 7 here, I did all the music to the Dayton air shows through Flyboy Productions. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So many, a bucket list of things.
So I stayed connected. But the leader of the Dazz Band had always told me, when you're ready,
Come
you can come back. He called me every 3 months. Bobby would call. You ready? I need you, man. I need you. So I went back in 2019 and been with him since. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Not only now we're moving the section of help giving back to the community. That went through a lot of my questions there. Do you see funk? Do you see funk as still relevant to music today, whether from direct sampling or from an inspirational standpoint?
Both. Yeah, both. Because the creators of today's funk music, they can take and sample other songs to make into one song, and it comes out funky. I can't do that because I create my own songs. So it's hard for me to take a piece of this and a piece of that and put it together for a song, and then inspirational, of course, that's always going to happen. People are always going to be inspired to write, to do funk music. It lives in us, and it lives in our bloodline. It lives in the people that are around us, who love our kind of music. That's why so many old school bands are working again, because the people want that music, young and old. So a lot of groups are back out, Barcades, Confunction, the Dazz Band, Ohio Players, Morris Day and the Time, Evelyn Champagne King. A lot of those 70 groups and 80 groups are back out because people want that music. Midnight Star,
And it's powerful to think that after 50 years, your music is still wanted and relevant.
Yeah.
That's a great feeling.
Riding High is like one of the top 10 most sampled songs in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So we're almost done. We have a couple more questions left. So earlier we talked about, way in the beginning, we talked about music education, how it gave you a greater understanding, and it made you start of the musician of who you are, and you've obviously grown from there, but that was your start with the school program. How important is the music education system for our future generations?
I think it is very important. They should bring it back into the schools and not subcontract them out. It should be a part of the school system, because if you look back when they did have music departments, just look what it did for kids. Kept them out of trouble. It gave them something to blow off their self-esteem if they needed it. Just like art, they need to bring art back into the school system as well. And gym, gym was one of the things I look forward to, because you're sitting in a classroom all day. You got to have some kind of relief. And the music classes and the art classes, gym was one of those things that gave students relief. So I think it's very important, and I will push and sign any petition to make it happen. We got to convince the people up in the White House, the Congress, for that, to find money for those things. So, but we do have outside arts programs around the city, to provide, but the families got to pay for it if those programs don't get a grant for it, and those only last so long.
I mean, absolutely. As people, like you said, the younger people want to still listen to your music nowadays. What do you say? What would you want to say, or you can say to the younger generation, yearning for their voices to be heard, as we're a new generation, maybe with new problems as we move into 2020 and beyond? What advice would you give people on how to express their voice?
Number one, keep funk alive. The advice I would give them is live out your dream. If your dream is to do music, do it. There's plenty of us professionals around in your area that you can turn to and get advice or help on to get to your next plateau of music, or the next level that you want to be at. Because we know everything's about technology. Everybody think they can just buy the software and jump right into it, but there's still a craft to making that happen. How to articulate the technology and how to record and how to use recording, because you have a lot of young people that's doing their own thing with the new with the technology that comes out. I learned something from my grandchildren. An app that they had called Launchpad. It had a bunch of beats and stuff. And I said, "Where'd you get that beat from?" He said, "Launchpad, Poppy." He said, "You can get it here. Come on, I'll show you how to download it." I've been using it. So they're privy to a lot of stuff, but still they need that help and that push to help them get to the next level.
Absolutely. When you look back at your whole career, I mean, not just as a musician, but overall, at the overall collective musical history of Dayton, what emotions do you associate with this place, with Dayton, Ohio?
Oh man, Dayton's been everything for me. Born and raised here. Dayton's been good to me throughout my whole life. It's from childhood to elder, if you want to say it now. And they still are good to me, But you got to give back to your community. That's the key that I've found in getting support. You have to give back to your community. What they give to you, you got to put back in. And that's the key to being successful.
I'll write it down now. That's the key right there.
That's the key.
Okay, I think maybe I have time for two, but definitely this one. As a grandparent, you now have daughters and grandchildren. Have you taught them how to play funk and how to play some instruments similar to your mother inspiring you?
They listen to my music. They tell me all the time, "Poppy, guess what I listened to on YouTube the other day? And I didn't know that was you." And so they're listening to my music. I haven't taught them anything yet. They're teaching me. And they said, "We listened to your music, Poppy, and look what I came up with." So I know when I move to Indianapolis that I'll be working with them, on a steady basis. They'll be over at the studio, and so I'm looking forward to that.
What does it mean for them?
Oh, it means a legacy. I'm hoping that I'm leaving a legacy for them, and they carry it on, and they leave a legacy for their children if they decide to have children. So it's just keeping the bloodline going, the interest of the craft.
That's you worded it perfectly. I was literally, my next question was looking back at your legacy. So I guess the one last question, maybe we don't have to put this in the documentary, but
Yes, you do.
where did funk come from? Everyone
Oh,
says a different
man.
answer.
Woo! For me, there's no handle on it. Funk comes from within. Again, it's a feeling. The audience put the name on it. Man, that's funky. You may not intended it to be funky. So it's a feeling that's that's created in you, that's generated to the public. That's the only way I can put it. It's no one thing you can grab right here or grab from here, or it's something in the air. It's just the feeling and the surroundings of who you've been around that you've listened to, and you've taken it and interpreted it into your way, how you would do something. It's like if I had stuff plugged up, I could have showed you a quick way how you come up with something. But it's like if I hear a beat in a song, I'll take that beat and put a different groove on it using the same beat. This is a question you haven't asked. How many people use the same drum beat?
I couldn't tell you. You know?
Do you know every other song you probably hear on the radio has the same drum beat, but just because it has a different melody and a different groove, you don't know that. But we know it. Oh, that's the beat that went to so-and-so. That's the beat that went, but they just got a different groove. Because it's always going to be a 4/4, or 1/2, or 3/4, type of beat, a shuffle, ace, 16, on the hi-hat, double up on the snare, like James Brown's drumming. We called that the monkey beat. Why they called it the monkey beat, I don't know. But that's the beat that people used in high school a lot, that backbeat. So, man, it's just pioneers like James Brown and these people brought that kind of vibe to us, to give us a feeling that we say, hey man, I'm gonna bring up a groove. You could say I'm gonna play a groove like that, but it's not a groove like that, because your thought pattern is different. But in your mind, you saying, I hear it. Can't you hear that? Sound like James Brown stuff, don't it? No, man. What you talking about?
It's all how you interpret it.
Yeah, it's how you interpret it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't think there's no one handle on where does funk come from. As a pastor would say, there's no such word as funk. I'm quite sure you heard that from a pastor before. Yeah, they say there's no such word as funk.
Well, I think I like your answer the best. From all the people that I've gotten to talk to, your answer is the best. It comes from within. It comes from within.
It does.
People be like, I think it comes from here, and everyone just gives a location.
No, it comes from within.
Yeah.
And it comes from within because of the walk that you've had. You may have been down south for a year. You may have been out west for a year, and you're around the different types of music from east to west coast, from north to south. All the music is different, but it's speaking the same language.
Yeah.
But so it has to come from within. I mean, when I sat down to do Riding High, it was a feeling, and the feeling was created from being high at that particular time. Now, I don't have to have that I don't have to be high to write anything, It comes natural. I can be in bed at 3 a.m. and get up because in my sleep I done heard something. I'll come in here and track it.
Wow.
And that's the beauty of having a home studio
Yeah.
and the technology.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, but two of the Faze-O members have passed. Roger passed this year, the drummer, from cirrhosis of the liver, and Bip died last year from COVID.
Wow.
He had a bad heart, and he had a tear in one of the arteries, and he was in the hospital, and they were going to do surgery, but he caught COVID while he was in there, so they sent him home. So he was going, the next day he was going to get his medicine or something, his wife said, and pulled over into a parking lot, man, and had a heart attack. You know. So we were just, the guitar player, he was over here the other day and we was just talking about, you know, man, I said, we would never find another voice like that. You know, he had a bluesy funk voice. You know, it was bluesy and funky. You know, it's kind of raspy, but it's hard to find singers like that. You know, because, you know, I still get calls from promoters. They telling me put a Phase 3 group together. We want to book you guys. Just me and the guitar player, you know. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to go through that. You know, so.
Well, we thank you so much.
Yes.
for your time.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Seriously,
It's been a pleasure.
It's been. I mean.